Bonjour tout le monde, hello everybody. I'm Olivier Kempf, Associate Fellow at Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique, and I'm very pleased to moderate and introduce that webinar on disinformation, which is that the title, A Common Threat to Democracies. With us, two persons, Dr. Mairo Ichihara. Good morning or good afternoon, Ichihara-san. You're professor and graduate fellow at the School of Law and the School of International and Public Policy at Hitotsubashi University in Japan. You have many responsibilities in different steering committees. You were an associate fellow at Georgetown University in Washington, and you are specialized in defense and international relation policies, especially on China. With us as well, Valérie Niquet. Valérie, you are a fellow, you are a researcher, a full researcher at Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique in Paris. You are very specialized in international relations and defense politics in Eastern Asia, especially Japan and China, but Korea and Taiwan as well. So a few words before leaving the floor to our two guests uh, about this topic of disinformation or subversion or misinformation or however you call it, because there are difficulties in defining the terms. I would go back in three vignettes, three theaters, I would say, where this information appears. One which is obvious for European and especially French audience is Ukraine, and especially with all the maneuvers by Russia, because everybody gets that in mind. Uh, what I want to say is when you look at Russia and its influence strategy, there are four targeted audiences. One, which is its own population. The other one is the Ukrainian population. The third one is the Western population, and the fourth one is the rest of the world. And why I say that is because here in France and here in Europe, we are very keen to describe the Russian maneuver of influence in our own theater, in our own environment, but we very rarely tackle the other targets by Russia. Another focus would be on another scene, another theater, which is Gaza and the war, where we saw an opposition of two narratives worldwide, and especially here in France, but I guess as well in Japan, and two narratives, one by the Palestinian, which insisted on the slaughter in Gaza, when the Israelis insisted on the reaction on 7 October. And here we have a competition between two narratives, which is not exactly disinformation, but angle on information that when you choose one angle, you say that the other is disinforming. So disinformation is not just about the news, and the emitter of the news, but this is also about the recipient of the news. Third, theater, a kind of new one theater, which is the Atlantic, was thanks to the recent statement by Donald Trump on Canada, Greenland, Panama. Think about the tweets by Elon Musk in Germany and UK. You French audience, think about the statement by Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot saying that he should consider to prohibit X and Twitter in France, and thanks to yesterday or 2 days ago decision by Mark Zuckerberg to stop fact checking on Facebook. So, well, another way of considering disinformation, it's not just propaganda or its influence and its action on publics and audience. So, this is a few introduction. I would leave the floor to Ishihara-san. Would you have a word about this question of disinformation on as a threat to democracies?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. So my name is Maiko Ichihara. And well, can I share my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
of course you can. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Today I would like to talk well about disinformation as a common threat to democracies and the liberal world order. And I really thank you for the host for inviting me to this occasion. And fortunately and unfortunately, this webinar is conducted at such a right timing when Meta decided that it will end fact check on Facebook and Instagram in 2025. And as a steering committee member of the Japan Fact Check Center, I take it very seriously. And there has been discussions whether fact check is actually effective or not. And well, there are indeed difficulties in counter measuring against disinformation. Um, Firstly, disinformation spreads much faster than correct information. So, well, chasing after disinformation all the time is very difficult itself. Secondly, effective fact check results should be released within 1 to 2 hours of the release of the disinformation, which is very difficult, especially given that a large number of disinformation gets spread both by domestic and international actors. Thirdly, fact-checking results tend to hang in a filter bubble. So while we want to spread those fact-check results to those people who should read it, but it often does not reach them. And finally, fact-checking reinforces beliefs of disinformation spreaders rather than correcting them. So in those ways, fact-check does have some limitations. But on the other hand, still, the Meta's decision to stop fact checking is problematic. Some argue that the community note function that Meta is intending to implement would function better. But what we can see from the example of X tells us that after Elon Musk drastically reduced its content moderation capabilities, the number of disinformation rose radically. And according to Center for Countering Digital Hate in 2023, when 200 cases of hate speech and misinformation related to the conflict between Israel and Hamas were reported to X by the center, only 4 were deleted after a week, and 98% of the remaining posts remained on the platform. So that means that even with the community note function, disinformation remains there and maintains having some impact. And apparently, fact check became much more political, especially in the United States. And that was one of the reasons why, and the major reason why Meta decided to take down the function. And that was especially because Trump supporters considered themselves as arbitrary targets of fact checks. So after the 2020 US presidential election, and after Biden came to the presidency, those fact checkers and researchers were targeted and sued in the United States by especially Republican, Judiciary Committee. And so that was how fact check became politicized. But the current overall situation, not only that of Meta, shows that there's a large number of organizations, being fact check organizations, media, think tanks, universities, that are taking those political decisions not to stand out, after Trump administration comes in, second Trump administration comes in. So after January 20th, we can expect, unfortunately, further expansion of hate speech and xenophobia in the United States. And this is problematic that Meta ended fact check, especially given that the budget for propaganda is increasing in some of the authoritarian countries that are conducting a huge number or huge scale of propaganda campaigns, which include mostly Russia and China. And in terms of China, they increased their budget for diplomatic endeavors increased by 12% in 2023. And budget for state media increased by 433% in February/March in March 2022 in the case of Russia. So we are now seeing this massive expansion of propaganda campaigns from the authoritarian side, and they are using information warfare, and disinformation is one of the tools that they use. And so thus we have to think how to really counter that narrative warfare. And this is problematic because, international relations used to be relatively stable and change was relatively gradual because states were constrained by international structure, be it military power, economic power, or normative structure. And all changes in the international level tended to be slow, and that was why international relations tended to be relatively stable. But right now, into the SNS era, agents are trying to change the international norm structure by appealing to the individual level and by seeking to mobilize people by appealing to their emotions. And SNS has this attention economy model, which is that their algorithm pushes those emotional posts to up there so that people can easily see it. So that means that those postings that ignite anger and hatred tends to be more seen by people. And this is how the SNS is utilized by those actors. And the election interference, as well as influence operations during the average time, has been more and more serious. If you look at 2024 U.S. elections, we saw three types of foreign actors conducting influence operations. One was Russia, which had Operation Overlord campaign, trying to boost the Trump campaign and Republican candidates. They used a massive number of AI-created fake websites, fake videos, fake voice messages, and pictures and so forth. And second type of actor in the influence operations in 2024 U.S. election campaign was China's camouflage. They tried to disrupt U.S. society, divide the society, and destabilize the society. And toward the end of the election campaign, they also targeted members of Congress who take hardline stance against China on the Taiwan issue. And third type of actors there was Iran's Cotton Sanderstorm campaign. They took slightly different approach where they did mostly hack and leak. So they hacked election-related information, important information from election-related sites and so forth, and then tried to disclose it. And their intention was to make the Trump camp lose the election. And so U.S. election this time was faced massive interference. And it's really hard to say to what extent disinformation was used and how many of those posts were created and so forth. But one substitute can be seen in here as the number of X posts by Chinese, Russian, and Iranian government officials, as well as state media, which is from Alliance for Securing Democracy of the German Marshall Fund. So their well, government officials and state media postings on X was decreased actually in August 2024. But from then on, toward the end of the toward the day of the election in November 5, they gradually increased the number of posts on X. And the gradual increase in the number of posts leading up to the US elections seems to show that information was being disseminated beyond routine public relations activities. So it seems to show that they intended to make some influence onto the election campaign. And yet, that's the foreign interference and the utilization of disinformation is not only something that we have to talk about when we talk about US elections. Apparently, in the Japanese society, we are also observing a great number of disinformation spreading around, and many of which are spread by foreign actors. And one indication, well, it's really hard to show how many disinformation has been spreading around. But one indication, I think, is the number of newspaper articles containing the term disinformation. To this does not necessarily show the number of disinformation per se, but it helps us understand how much the society is paying attention to the issue of disinformation and how much disinformation issue itself is becoming a problem in the society. And as you can see, there has been an rapid increase toward this research was conducted only up to June 2022, but you can see radical increase from the end of 2016 to 2022. So from this graph, what we can say is that disinformation started being discussed in the Japanese society around the time of the US presidential election in 2016, perceiving a large number of disinformation circulating. And but after then, the COVID-19 outbreak, the pandemic increased the number of disinformation in the Japanese society as well. So Japan itself started talking about disinformation in the society. And then there's a huge uptick of disinformation in 2022, which shows that Russian propaganda campaign, which used disinformation, made some impact into the Japanese society as well. Indeed, Russian accounts became very influential in the Japanese discursive space online. The left-hand side shows the most influential Russian accounts on Twitter as of May 1st, 2022. So it was only about 2 months since the Russian aggression of Ukraine started. And you can see that the number 4 most influential Russian account in the in the entire world was actually that of the Russian embassy in Japan's account. And given that they use Russian, English, and Japanese languages, but given that Japanese language is used only by the Japanese people, so it's a minority language. This is really radical thing that their account became so influential. And that was because Russian trolls, Chinese trolls, as well as Japanese conspiracy theorists spread Russian disinformation in the Japanese society. Um, and so we have to pay very close attention to what they do, and we have to prepare and will take countermeasures to what to those disinformation. And not only Russia, but also a bigger concern for us is China. China is not only using those influence information warfare, but they seem to be doing some analysis before intervention. What you can see here is the result of correspondence analysis I conducted on wars from news sharing, which which is an X account which spreads quite a number of news. But this news sharing seems to be spreading discourse which is in line with Russian and Chinese discourse, especially Chinese. And well, when I conducted this kind of correspondence analysis, the terms that are located close to each other are the terms that were used often together. And also those terms that are shown here are the terms that were used in this news sharing related to it's actually related to the LDP presidential election, which happened in October. And I took all the articles that talked about LDP elections. And here you can see that they talked about Kono Taro, Takaichi Sanae, and Koizumi Shinjiro, three candidates for the LDP presidential elections. While we had 9 presidential elections for LDP at that time. So this shows that the news sharing or some Chinese Chinese actors conducted some research before doing the influence operations and decided the targets. And you can see that a lot of wars cluster around Takaichi Sanae, which shows that they were trying to convey the image that Takaichi Sanae was close to CIA or she was close to the Unification Church and those problematic things. And this is very interesting in a sense that Takaichi Sanae was pretty much critical of China, but at the same time there was another candidate who was critical of China, who was Kobayashi. But Kobayashi was not mentioned in their news. So this shows that they did not consider Kobayashi was having a good chance of winning the LDP presidential election and focused on Takaichi for the influence operations. And it's about time. I think I have to stop. And I want to say finally that so countering disinformation is very important. But at the same time, we also have to think about the impact of malinformation, which is not necessarily disinformation, but malicious information, which is arbitrarily focused. And I'm not gonna explain too much, but compared to outright disinformation that was spread by Russia at the time of Russian aggression of Ukraine, at the beginning of the aggression, the the propaganda that NATO's eastern expansion caused the aggression actually had greater impact onto the Japanese society. And so this kind of information that's very hard to say whether it's disinformation or not tends to have greater impact. So, we have to expand scientific research in the field, and at the same time, we have to be aware of perception hacking by paying attention to what those authoritarian governments are doing. We could misleadingly give a perception as if some of the domestic actors are closely connected with authoritarian governments. So we have to avoid that kind of wrong perception. And we also have to try to avoid divisive terminologies, discourse, and actions, and instead spreading inclusive and pro-democratic narratives is important. And finally, let's expand interaction offline, not only online. Thank you very much.
So, Olivier.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ichihara-san. I'm very pleased to listen to your point about starting by fact-checking and enlarging first to the situation in Japan and then to that larger notion of malinformation. Thank you very much. I have a few questions to you, but I keep the floor to distribute it to Valérie Niquet. Please, Valérie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olivier and Ichihara-san, for your excellent presentation. And thank you also to all the participants for this second webinar of the FRS Japan program. So I will focus my presentation on the importance of deception and information warfare in Chinese strategic thinking, because I think this is at the basis of what is going on now, especially in Asia and regarding Japan. But this presentation could also, at least in part, apply to Russia's strategic culture. Deception and information warfare are key elements of Chinese strategic thinking. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, a very ancient military treatise, stresses the importance of deception and the strategic use of spies. In his book, Chapter 1, he obviously says that all warfare is based on deception, and the last chapter is entirely focused on spying. So the Art of War has been part of the curriculum of military academies in the PRC after its rediscovery in the years 1980s. In that sense, deception and information warfare are not just tools, but core tenets of Chinese strategic thinking. And this is also shaped by a combination of historical philosophy and Leninist political ideology, and as a result, the CCP's approach to governance. The Chinese Communist Party approach to deception and information warfare is deeply influenced by Leninist ideology. Lenin emphasized the importance of controlling the narrative, and this idea resonated strongly with the CCP, which has relied on propaganda and information control to consolidate its authority since its founding. In the CCP's governance model, information warfare serves two purposes. Domestically, it strengthens the party's legitimacy through censorship and propaganda. Internationally, and it is more to a point, it shapes perceptions to advance China's geopolitical and strategic goals. One of the major books where these concepts are clearly explained and put to use is The Science of Military Strategy, published regularly by the Academy of Military Science of the PLA since 1987. The SMS stresses that modern warfare is no longer confined to physical battlefields, but spans political, economic, cultural, and psychological domains. Key points include winning without fighting, a principle rooted in Sun Tzu's Art of War, with the importance of achieving victory by shaping the adversary's perceptions and decisions without engaging in dangerous kinetic conflict. Integrated concept of warfare. Information is considered both as a weapon and a battleground. Military, political, and economic means are integrated into a cohesive strategy to dominate the information domain. On shaping the cognitive environment, the psychological impact of information aiming to influence the mindset of decision makers on populations. A recent example is, for instance, at the press conference of the porte-parole of the Chinese Ministry of Defense on December 31, 2024, he had a question on US bases, Japan and Okinawa, where he answered, I quote, "For quite a long time, US forces in Japan has been accused of frequent criminal acts. Their misconduct has triggered strong anxiety and protest among local residents. We know if the US troops are really gone, the people of Okinawa will get what they hope for." The PLA's concept of information warfare is built on several key principles. First, sizing information dominance. Second, integrated network electronic warfare, a blend of cyber warfare and electronic warfare applied to the military. And more to the point, in peacetime, there is the three warfares doctrine, where psychological, media, and legal warfare are tools to achieve strategic goals. Psychological warfare means undermining the morale of adversaries through disinformation or malinformation and propaganda. Media warfare is using state-run or other social media platforms to shape public opinion globally, and especially, for instance, in the global south. Legal warfare is exploiting international laws and norms or try to change these norms to justify actions or delegitimize opponents. Deceptions has evolved in China's modern strategy to encompass sophisticated information warfare. This includes cyber operations, media manipulations, and psychological tactics. Cyber operation. China has engaged in large-scale cyber campaigns targeting both governmental and private institutions. For instance, in Taiwan, phishing campaigns have targeted government agencies seeking to extract sensitive data or disrupt operations. Similar tactics are used against Japan, as was mentioned before, focusing on its defense on critical infrastructure, but also political institutions. Disinformation campaigns are among the most visible forms of Chinese information warfare. In Taiwan, for instance, during the presidential election, disinformation campaigns falsely accused former President Tsai Ing-wen of corruption. Fake news stories are also exaggerated the government's handling of COVID-19, aiming to sow distrust and confusion. In Japan, Chinese state media spread false narratives about the release of treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant, claiming it would poison seafood across the Pacific. This was amplified to fuel anti-Japanese sentiment in China, but also among regional audiences. Media manipulation and psychological operation. China manipulates state-run media and uses social platforms like Twitter, Facebook, or Twitter X, Facebook and TikTok to spread narratives that serves its interest. Troll farms amplify divisive content, creating societal rifts within target countries. For instance, again in Taiwan, social media platforms were flooded with fake stories designed to undermine trust in democratic institutions. In Japan, narratives about its military reforms are about Japan being more aggressive, and these narratives are circulated to create fear and tension in the region, weakening Japan's ability to form alliances. The CCP's ultimate goal in employing deception and information warfare is to achieve information dominance. This serves multiple strategic objectives. First, shaping global narratives. China portrays itself as a responsible global power, while painting adversaries, particularly the US, Taiwan, and Japan, as destabilizing forces. And this narrative is also very important for economic interests of China. Undermining democracies by spreading fake news on creating confusion, China seeks to weaken trust in democratic process, and this is very effective in some countries in the global south again. Taiwan's elections are a recurring target for such tactics, but not only. Weakening alliances, disinformation is used to sow discord within alliances, like the US-Japan partnership, for instance, making collective action against China more difficult. Reinforcing CCP, Chinese Communist Party legitimacy, domestically, information warfare supports narratives of CCP competence and strengths. Internationally, it deflects criticism and promotes China model of governance as an alternative to liberal democracy. Of course, there are implications for global security. China's reliance on deception, on information warfare poses significant challenges for the international community, challenges for democracies. Open societies are particularly vulnerable to disinformation campaigns, including Japan, as they rely on free information flow. Detecting and attributing this covert operation is also often difficult. The cultural gap in strategic thinking between China and democracies complicates the formulation of effective countermeasures. But there is a need for countermeasures. To address these challenges, countries must adopt proactive strategies such as enhancing media literacy and public awareness to reduce impact of disinformation, strengthening cybersecurity infrastructure to counter cyber attacks. Japan, for instance, is switching to a more active cyber defense to counter attacks that threaten its interest and stability, and collaborating internationally to expose and combat Chinese disinformation campaigns. To conclude, deception and information warfare are not just tactics, but foundational principles in Chinese strategic thinking, rooted in Leninist ideology and the CCP's governance approach. These strategies have been modernized to exploit the digital age and target vulnerabilities in open societies like Europe, France, but also in Asia, Japan, Taiwan, or South Korea. And of course, countries in Southeast Asia too. China views the information domain as a critical battleground where achieving dominance can deliver decisive advantages, and the range is wide, from propaganda wolf diplomacy to constant pressure from military exercises or gesticulation. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, my mic is on. Thank you very much, Valérie, for this topic. I noted that you started with deception, then you passed to info, and you finished by info dominance. So a kind of gradation, which is very interesting. May I ask to our followers that if they want to ask question, please can you use the button question-réponse Q&A qui est en bas de votre écran, down your screen, and then use the chat to raise your questions, and I will pass them to our panelists. If I may, I have many questions, but just to have something that can tackle both of you. You are talking of info actions by China, both of you. And my question is, were these info actions by China effective in two examples that you mentioned? The first is a Taiwanese presidential race, and the other one is the Japanese legislative race. Were these Chinese influential actions effective or not? Because, okay, I listen to your answer first before commenting. Ichihara-san, please.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I have been conducting various research, but well, overall, Chinese influence operations so far tends to be not too successful in the Japanese society. For example, at the time of the release of the um, treated water from the Fukushima area, as Dr. Niquet talked about, they conducted some huge, massive scale of influence operations, but that rather united the society rather than dividing the society. But it's becoming harder and harder for us to measure the impact in a sense that their influence operations became normalized, and so they conduct influence operations all the time. Especially, for example, if we think about the Iraq-Hamas warfare. China has been spreading vast amount of disinformation and also malinformation, which tries to give an image, more negative image about the U.S. And that's gaining ground a lot in Japan too, as well as in other countries. And it's really hard to say to what extent China has been being effective in it. And we have to, I guess, pay attention. We'll continue paying attention to it.
Valérie?
Yes, just a few points. Yes, I agree that disinformation campaigns by China are not obviously been extremely effective when you look at the results of the elections in Taiwan, for instance. This is quite clear. However, China's influence is still felt in many fields, and maybe not directly on elections, but I will go back to that example of Fukushima, where China has been extremely active to denounce and criticize Japan. Inside Japan, it had a certain effect of not being, regrouping people against that kind of disinformation campaign. But when you look at some position taken by countries in the Pacific, it has been in a way damaging to Japan's reputation, or at least Japan has had to really prepare to answer to countries in, small island countries, for instance, in the Pacific, where Japan is very extremely active in terms of donors, aid, and so on. But China is also pretty much present. And they used that argument to try to throw a divide between Japan and these countries. So I think in that sense, one has to be extremely careful about it depends at what you look at. Direct result in election, I'm not sure, but on the international scene, it can be very damaging. And the second point is Okinawa. This is not, I mentioned that declaration by the PLA Minister of Defense, very recent one for the New Year's interview, where China definitely is trying to build tensions between US bases in Okinawa population, central government on Okinawa provincial authorities and population. And one must not forget that the pacifist feelings in Japan is still strong, and particularly in Okinawa, where it has been very much present. And China is playing on this. On that front, which is essential for China, because I just remind people that islands, Okinawa archipelago, the closest island to Taiwan is only 180 or 20 kilometers from Taiwan. So Okinawa is really at the forefront of any tension between China and Taiwan. And one of the objectives of China's disinformation or malinformation campaigns is really to build a feeling in Okinawa that they do not want war anymore. They do not want to be dragged into a war with China. So I think this is quite successful in that sense.
Thank you very much. I have a follow-on question on this question by a follower. Thank you, Vincent. And his question is, how to scientifically assess the impact of disinformation? How can we know how effective they are?
So maybe
Ichihara? Oh, yeah, well,
Ichihara-san,
yes.
can you, yes. Yes, the question, maybe I repeat, we didn't hear very well, is how to scientifically assess the impact of disinformation to know how effective they are. So, do you know, Ichihara-san, if there is a scientific method to evaluate this impact?
Sure. I mean, well, evaluating the impact of information warfare is actually the hardest thing. Harder than analyzing what kind of operations is conducted, who are there, and so forth. However, I would say there are three methodologies that we can use. First is interviews slash survey research. We tend to bring in, questions of what kind of perception the interviewees had before they faced the particular disinformation. And we also ask, how their perception changed after they faced that disinformation. And we create, hypothetical sort of situation in the same way by conducting survey research. And so that's the most typical sort of research method that we use. And secondly, I mostly use content analysis, and I especially use quantitative correspondence analysis to show how media or people's discourse changed after specific disinformation starts spreading. And you can you can analyze the change of discourse, setting by the week or by the month or by the year, as you like. And so, you can analyze and compare. And finally, you can also conduct discourse analysis on how people's discourse changed or how people's discourse are different depending on whether they face particular disinformation or not. And please also remember that specific groups would be exposed to disinformation online, but some of the groups are not exposed to disinformation online to the same extent, depending on maybe the age group or region and so forth. So you can create a sort of unique way of doing research.
Valérie?
About scientific method, I'm not a specialist of the question, so it would be more difficult for me to answer on how to evaluate impact. But I would like to mention, I mean, we started with, if I focus on China, we started with, not only China, but with this Leninist influence on CCP, Communist Party. We started with newspapers, tracts, and publications, and now we are to an age where the possibility to disseminate disinformation and malinformation is enormous. And I just would like to mention that I am now focusing on a new field that I would like to explore and that might be interesting also, is a field of video games, where China is becoming more and more active, trying to publish its own, produce its own video games, but also buying stakes in the most famous and popular video games on the planet. And through these narratives, China is also trying to create the image of a very extremely attractive, and this also goes with other things that are not directly related to disinformation but more influence, like the big website where you can do like Shein, for instance, or Temu, where China is attracting new consumers worldwide, and so it builds an image of an overwhelmingly powerful, economically successful China, and this also plays a very important role in attracting attention from younger people or people who are not very secure or sure of their own political position. And these are new vectors that we must also follow. And this is something that China has, for instance, but not Russia. I mean, Russia is a different guild completely, but China also has all these elements related to consumptions and pleasure seeking, and this is also very important.
Yeah, it's to seduce, not to convert. I have another question from a follower. Please, other followers, do not hesitate to use the Q&A button to raise questions. What he says, and probably to both of you, is let's go on the other side and how to fight and to struggle against disinformation at the state level and at the individual level. Ichihara-san?
Sure. Well, I have been actually dealing with this aspect extensively for the past 3 years. Well, disinformation is one tool used in the information warfare, narrative warfare. And when the state tries to counter disinformation, that can be actually labeled easily as a propaganda campaign. So we have to be very careful with that. In that sense, states will be able to better work with civil society actors and researchers in providing trustable information, which is used for attributions. And instead, they can relegate the role of countering the disinformation itself to the civil society and researchers, I think. Because disinformation itself comes in a large scale, one after another. So chasing after disinformation, individual disinformation, is not feasible or realistic. Instead, I have been advocating for the importance of creating counter narratives that is pro-democratic and inclusive. And for me, I have been conducting training sessions for youth at my university, Hitotsubashi, every year. Teaching them how to understand the target of those authoritarian influence operations, how to cater to the wants and needs of those targets, and how to create those pro-democratic narratives with some appeal.
Well, I do not have much to add to that. And I think that you're right, debunking also is extremely important. So raising awareness is very important. And I think that maybe it's extremely frustrating because it's impossible to answer and to find a solution to any false or or malinformation that we find on social media and social networks. But I think it's important to learn to be extremely active, present, and reactive in a positive way, also on social media, just as China is, in order to debunk, to be able to debunk as soon as possible, narratives that are extremely damaging to democracies and political agenda in our societies. But of course, there are limits. So, yeah, it remains a big question mark.
I've maybe the last question. To what extent the fact that many people, I would say in Europe, including medias, are leaving X or Twitter for Blue Sky will impact this information?
Well, SNS functions as a platform amongst the people as far as when a great number of people uses the same platform. So in that sense, for small number of moves from X to Blue Sky is not going to make so much an impact. So we have to see a huge number of people starting using Blue Sky. Unfortunately, in Japan, we do not see that much a massive move yet. And up until we see that kind of thing and that kind of move, we are not going to see the disappearance of disinformation from the X, unfortunately. But let's hope that people start using Blue Sky.
Well, do not have anything to add to that. I thought that Blue Sky was quite popular. Maybe I made a mistake, but I heard that Blue Sky maybe was getting traction in Japan. So I don't know. I mean, more than in our societies. No, I think I read something about the fact that Blue Sky was attracting people in Japan, but maybe every society has its own social media. For instance, Line in the East is extremely active, and China has been extremely active also online, both in Taiwan and in Japan, for instance. So you're right, they are adapting very well to the target, actually, that they are citing.
Yeah, if I may, if Blue Sky becomes the new forum, there will be trolls and influence and disinformation as well. And my point is, do not abandon the battlefield. So if the battlefield is on Twitter, remains on Twitter. Blue Sky is a kind of salon, very kind, very convenient, very comfortable between the few of us. But the few of us are not the targets. I'm sorry to say that. So we have to remain on Twitter and to fight and battle on Twitter. But this is my opinion. Thank you very much. I think it's time and we have to conclude. Professor Ichihara, thank you very, very much for your statements and your insights. It was very, very interesting and convincing. Valérie Niquet, I won't say the best that I think of FRS as usual, but I'm not a neutral referee. So thank you very much for organizing and participating to this webinar, and thank you to all our attendants and followers. I'm sure that this will be podcasted on the FRS website, so do not hesitate to review it in a few time if you have time. Thank you very much and have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Olivier. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.